Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be shooting today's workshop. This is a really fun one. I think we're all going to create a really beautiful floral bunny. So today's vessel, ordinarily we would work in a vase, but today we are using this really pretty kind of grapevine looking Easter rabbit. And this will be the container for today's arrangement. There is a little bit of prep work that goes into preparing for class today. So if you are taking this, you're obviously taking our pre-recorded version. So that's wonderful. You can always pause me and go through these steps and then just turn me back on. So don't feel like you need to rush to get through anything in class today. So you'll see that your little plastic bunny or your bunny has a plastic liner on the inside. In our testing in the shop with this particular vase, we do kind of like to have an extra layer of some kind of protection that keeps all of the water inside the rabbit. So whether or not you're putting this on like a wood surface or on some type of surface that could be damaged by water, we just want to have some kind of additional protective layer in there. And today we are going to be using cellophane to achieve that. And I'm going to need to cut this cellophane down. So would be handy to have a pair of scissors nearby. Also would be handy if you are working in your kitchen, you can just fill up your kitchen sink with water. But if you're working in a different room, some type of bucket or large bowl that you can wet your Oasis floral foam in. And then other than that, the only other tools I will be using today beyond what we provided for you are either a pair of clippers. So I prefer the Sabotin or the ARS brand, but really you could use any type of clippers that you would otherwise use in your garden, or you can use a knife. So I use a small Swiss Army knife, but a sharp kitchen knife could also do a wonderful job cutting your stems as well. Just make sure that it has a straight edge rather than a serrated edge. Other than that, so just everything that you have in your bag that we delivered to you, a pair of scissors, something to cut with, and then a bucket of water. And then other than that, you should have everything you need in order to kind of do the whole class. So maybe take a minute and collect those things. But I will go ahead and get into the nitty-gritties of what we are going to do in order to start using this vase. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brick and I'm going to float it in some container or either a kitchen sink full of water. So this brick is called Oasis floral foam. What it does is it creates something inside of an irregularly shaped container that will give you kind of some structure in there. So you can see that this actual bunny itself, it's not very tall. It's probably about 4 inches tall. So if we tried to just start putting flowers in, you'd likely see that things would start to fall out pretty quickly. So the Oasis floral foam is going to help prevent any fallout or movement in an irregularly shaped container. So that's what we're going to use to do that. It's also going to hold water that's then going to feed your flowers and keep them nice and healthy and hydrated. So dual purpose, this is a wonderful tool. You could get it from a florist. You could get it from, I'm sure Amazon has it. I think Michael's probably has floral foam as well. So if you're looking to do an arrangement in this container next year or in a bunny in the future, this is something that's relatively easy to come by. I also think it would be really cute to even do like a potted plant in the back. So I think even repurposing this and putting like an ivy plant in the back could be really cute for like front steps. So lots of different ways that you can reuse this vase or container of some sort. Moss in the back would be really beautiful as well. So definitely don't throw him away. You can use him again down the road. So I'm going to saturate my foam in water. So for me today, I just have a plain bucket of water. If you happen to have a packet of flower food handy, you can certainly throw that in. It's just going to help. It's not going to be a game changer, but flower food is always helpful if you do have it. I have a pretty substantial bucket that happens to be able to fit my entire brick inside of it, but you don't necessarily have to use this entire brick. I'm going to use, you can see there's a nice little markers on it. I'm going to use two squares worth. So you can, if your container's a little bit smaller, maybe you're using a bowl, you can also just cut your brick down, just cutting off that last little section, because we're going to end up cutting it away anyway. But if you have a big enough container, you can absolutely just saturate the whole block. You can also, if you want to cut this away, you could use this in another vase in the future. So whatever you prefer. So this is really important. If I take this brick and I just push it down into the water, what you're going to find is that the outsides of the brick saturate, the insides will trap air. So it will get lots of little air bubbles inside of the brick. And then there's a potential that one of your stems could reach that air bubble and then just kind of be sitting in a dry piece of foam. So very particular in this next step, it's very important that I just am going to sit the brick on the surface of whatever liquid I'm putting it in. I'm going to sit it on the surface of the water. So right now my block is sitting on the surface of the water, and you'll see that it's going to slowly sink to the bottom. And the reason why it's so slow is it's because that water is kind of creeping into all of the foam. Again, if I pushed it down right now, it would make it look like the entire block was saturated, but you'd end up with a bunch of air holes. So you just kind of have to be patient and then wait for it to saturate on its own, which is what I'm waiting for. And it's very clear when the brick is saturated, it becomes like a dark green rather than this medium shade of green. So we will just start out by patiently waiting for our brick to soak. Okay, so now I'm going to pull it out of my bucket. You can see it's darker than before. It may have a little bit of drip. So you can go ahead and shake it a little bit. And then I happen to be working on a surface that can tolerate water, but you may just want to put it down on your cellophane if you don't have another place to put it. Now we're going to take our piece of cello. This is a massive piece of cellophane based on what we're going to need, but I'm just going to take my piece of cello and I'm just going to smush the center inside my bunny. So I just basically am lining it with the cellophane just as an extra protective sleeve to lock in all the moisture that's now inside of our brick. Next, we're going to take our brick and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of I usually will go with the short end facing down. So you can go in from this angle as well, but it requires a little bit more cutting. So I'll usually just kind of put my brick in up and down like so. Take either, I guess you will need a knife. So just taking a knife to cut the foam where it hits the top of the bunny's back. So I'm just kind of cutting this even with the edge of the bunny. So you'll see in there, just like so. And then what I'm going to do is what we call shimming in the shop. So basically I'm just going to cut off little slivers of this additional foam and then just kind of smush it into any open areas around that initial piece. So this part of it does not need to be super neat or fancy. It's going to end up getting covered entirely by floral, but we just want to make sure that we have as much of the inside of the bunny's back covered with this green foam. So I'm just going to kind of cut a small piece to go around each side of this square I first put in, and I'll just push it down so it reaches as far down, and I may need to just kind of shave away a top little bit of it. But luckily this foam is really easy to cut once it's wet. If you cut it dry, it makes the worst sound in the world, but when it's wet, it's really soft and easy to work with. Okay, so now I have the back of my bunny filled out. So you can see I just have that initial square, and then really softly I just kind of put some slivers around it to try to fill as much of that the cavity as possible. Okay, and next step, you're going to take our scissors, and I'm just going to cut away any excess cellophane. So I'm going to cut up until I reach the foam and then kind of around the bunny's back. And it's okay if this is also can be totally sloppy because again, the floral is going to kind of cover it all up. But this is just going to make sure that it's extra safe. If you have any spillage, that there's no leaking. Sorry, this is probably really loud on your end. Okay, so what I did is just kind of cut it around the outside of the foam so that I don't have a ton of it sticking out in every direction. Just cutting away a bit of excess here. Okay, so now we're prepped and ready to go ahead and start working with our floral. If you haven't already done so, I'm going to go ahead and just cut off this little tag here. And now we have a really cute bunny that is prepped and ready. You can manipulate your bunny. So if you have other things on your table that maybe you need to kind of spread his legs out, you can do that. I'm going to show you how I'm going to kind of manipulate his ears a little bit later on, but he is flexible, which is awesome as well. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to create a nice little coverage of this foam. So as you can tell, this isn't the most beautiful thing to see inside of a vase. So we kind of just want to camouflage it, cover it up so that what we can focus, that what we're focusing on is the beautiful floral that we're kind of adding in. So I'm going to start with my, this is called Variegated Little Leaf Pittosporum. So you should have 1 or 2 pieces, maybe 3 or 4 pieces, depending on how dense they were. So love this particular type of foliage because 1, it's variegated, so there is some kind of contrast and color on the leaf itself. That's going to create some really beautiful dimension in your arrangement. It tends to be great for spring because our spring kind of color palettes tend to lean more towards pastels and more muted, softer tones. So a greenery like this that is a little bit less severe and not like a stark dark green really blends beautifully with lighter, softer colors. So a favorite spring foliage of mine. I also really love it because you can break a single piece up into multiple smaller pieces. So it's going to be really perfect for something like this particular piece. So we'll take our clippers. The first thing I'm going to do is just kind of pull away. You'll see that there's lots of little stalks that kind of come out. So all of our pieces are going to look slightly different, but for the most part, that should be there should be some like obvious, logical, upright pieces here. So I'm going to just begin by pulling these apart. So I'm just kind of breaking them up, and I'm going to go ahead and break up both of my pieces. If you have a piece like this where all of the greens are kind of concentrated on one central stalk, you can just leave that together. But for these more branchy pieces, I am going to go ahead and just kind of break them into smaller bits. All right, so now I have a really messy pile of greens, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of go around the outside of my bunny's back and just kind of have pieces of greens coming out on all sides. So you can go ahead and start large pieces like this. You can actually cut them in 2. So you can even cut them down a little bit more. But we'll start with pieces like this. We just want to strip away anything from about halfway down. So just stripping away any leaves so that I have a nice stem that I can go ahead and stick into the vase. Because we're working with foam, we only need like 1.5 inches or so of stem. So I'm going to cut everything but like 1.5 inches of this clean stem. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just start behind my bunny's neck here, but you can see I'm going in at quite a bit of an angle. So I'm not going straight up and down. I'm going in at an angle. So it's going to kind of look like this floral is just kind of like cascading out of his back. So I'm going to just work my way around the outside, putting 1 piece of greens next to the next, 1 piece of greens next to the last, working my way to create like a nice collar around the back of my bunny. And again, if you have large pieces like this, you can definitely cut them into smaller pieces, because really we're just trying to create like a nice little base that we can then layer a floral onto. I am going to leave probably 2 pieces of this behind to put upright so that I can kind of fill out his back a little bit more. So as you're working your way around, just make sure that that you do have a few pieces that are left behind to fill in between in the center here. All right, so just continuing to work my way around the back of my bunny. And if you have a like tiny little cracks or crevices between your pieces of greens, that's totally fine. We have some moss that we're going to kind of tuck in so that we can conceal anything that's left behind after we put in our greens. And that will be kind of the final step. Once we have all of our flowers in, we'll go ahead and just kind of touch things up with that moss and fill any little nooks and crannies that may not have greens. Okay, so I created, just from above, you can see, just kind of rimmed the outside of my bunny's back. That's going to help to conceal most of those greens. And then I am going to kind of tuck a few pieces of greens in the center here. So I'm probably about halfway up his ears is probably where I'm going to aim to have my greens stop. So you can hold your stem right about this height, and then you can cut your stem if it's too long. So holding it about to here, and then I'm just gonna kind of stab a few pieces of greens to fill out the center part. And these greens are gonna end up kind of tucking themselves between the rest of our floral. And then if you do feel like my coverage is like about like this, so there's definitely, you can still see greens, or you can still see this foam in the middle. And I may leave 1 piece behind. I tend to, when I put my floral in, sometimes most of my greens will kind of get covered up. So I like to leave a piece or 2 behind to tuck in at the end, just to make sure that this green is kind of represented on all sides of the arrangement. Okay, so next up we are going to pull out our roses. So we are using 2 different varieties of roses today. We are using a Geraldine, which is a pink, and then I think we're using turtle roses. Yeah, so our yellow is a turtle. So your Geraldine is this beautiful kind of medium pink color. And you should have, I believe, 3 Geraldines and 5 of the yellows. So 3 pinks and 5 yellows. And then, yes, okay. And we also have some garden roses. They look a little bit different. I'm going to leave them for the last step. Your garden roses are more of a rich pink, leaning towards a hot pink. You can see that they do look pretty different if you get them side by side. And you're going to have 2 of these garden roses that are bigger and a little bit darker pink. And I'm going to leave those behind in my bucket. We're just going to begin with our regular traditional roses. So first step for our roses, I'm just going to remove any leaves. So I'm going to remove all leaves on the stem with the exception of there's a nice little collar underneath the head of the flower that is going to provide additional support. It actually supports that area where the petal is connecting to the stem itself. So if I pull these guys off, your rose will essentially just start to disintegrate. So make sure that you leave those on. Other than that, we're going to strip away any leaves, and do be careful because the yellow ones do have thorns. So our next step will be to remove our thorns. So there's a couple different techniques you can use to remove your thorns. If you're using a pair of clippers, you can literally just snip off any thorns. So just literally snipping them off. If you're using a knife, my favorite technique, because it's quickest, is just to kind of scrape them off. So you literally just kind of scrape them off the stem. And then the final technique, if you feel comfortable, you can just kind of press on the side of the thorn and it will just break off. So whatever method you prefer. All right, final step to get our roses prepped to go into this bunny arrangement is to remove our guard petals. So on these two particular varieties of rose, the guard petals are actually pretty obvious, so it may be pretty easy to recognize them. Our guard petals are the petals that were on the outside of the rose as it was developing. So from the minute that it was a bud until it was a fully grown rose, those petals were protecting the outside of the rose from all kinds of things: wind, rain, hands as it's being harvested, bugs. So any number of things, these petals were going to take the beating for. And you will see that they likely are a little bit shorter. They may be discolored. Oftentimes they're bruised or torn. And that just basically illustrates that they were doing their job. So I'm going to begin by just plucking off any petals on the outside that look different than the rest of the rose. So different or damaged. And we'll just pluck them off and just make sure that you get the entire petal off when you're plucking those off, because if you leave half the petal behind, it's going to start to rot, and then that just isn't great for our roses. So for our yellow ones, they're a little bit more closed. So you can also, as the final step, once you've removed your guard petals, just give it like a soft puff of air, and that will help to accelerate the rose opening a little. Okay, so now we've got all of our roses prepped, and I do want to make sure that both of these colors are represented kind of on all sides. So if we're sitting in a round table around this centerpiece, everyone gets to kind of see a little bit of everything. So I'm going to group my roses out before I go ahead and approach putting them into the arrangement. My first grouping is going to have 2 yellows and a pink. My second grouping is going to have 2 yellows and a pink. And my third grouping is going to have a yellow and a pink. So nice to kind of group them out beforehand so that I can kind of plug them into different holes and then make sure that they're nicely spread throughout my arrangement. Let me move that so you guys can see me better. Okay, so I'm going to do kind of one pocket up top. I'm going to probably do one kind of back here by the tail, and then I'm probably going to do my third one kind of in the center over here. So I'm going to start with a pocket of 3. So whichever one you want to begin with, I'm happening to begin with my pink rose. I can kind of hold my rose up near my top piece of greens. So kind of in line with my top piece of greens, which we said was about halfway down the ears. And then I can take my clippers and I'm going to cut it right around where it looks like it's going to hit the rabbit's butt. So clipping right around here, this area. This stem, I'm going to go ahead and get him kind of nice and high in my arrangement. I'm actually probably going to give an extra little, I usually give an extra ½ snip just because whenever I'm measuring, I find it's just a little bit too long. So you can go ahead and put your first rose. I kind of put them in right up kind of behind my rabbit's neck. So definitely don't want to be up and down like a flagpole in this design. I want it to look a little bit more organic. So shooting to have it kind of over here. I'm going to take my yellow rose, which is my next rose in this little pile, and I'm going to put him kind of below this first rose. So I can hold him up where I might like him to be in the design. So holding him up right about so, and then I'm going to clip where he looks like he's going to hit the rabbit's butt, and then just a little extra ½ inch. And then this guy, I'm going to go in a little bit more of an angle below that first one. And then final rose that's going to go in that grouping, almost going to be like a little bit of a triangle. So kind of between the two. So I can hold that guy up, can snip that stem, and then I'm going to nestle him in next to my first 2. When you're doing groupings of 3, it's nice to have one of your roses a little bit farther out or a little bit deeper in. That's going to counter any like super perfection in the design. So if there's any shapes that your brain can recognize, it's going to kind of hone in on that in the arrangement. So I really want you to be able to take this in as a full kind of collective piece. So I'm going to try to make it not look like a perfect triangle. So there's one of two ways you can do that. You can either play with your shape. So I could kind of pull my last rose out a little bit more and kind of make it more of an irregular triangular shape, or you can play with depth by having one of your roses be a little bit farther out or a little bit deeper in. Depth was something I struggled with kind of when I was beginning to design. So that's kind of what I gravitate towards, just to make sure that it doesn't look like a big round ball kind of sitting on this bunny's back. All right, so I have my cluster of 3 up top. I'm going to do a cluster of 2 kind of back on the rear here. I think I'm going to go ahead and just start with my pink one. So rather than going up top here, I'm going to go a little bit lower. So starting about halfway down. So positioning this guy about here, and then I can snip his stem. And then this first one, I'm going to get right about so. Okay, you can see it's kind of right on the back end there. I'm going to take my yellow one, and then I'm going to do that below that. So right around here, clipping that stem. And then this guy can get in like so. So I've got this happening here. And then if I turn my bunny all the way around, I'm going to get my second cluster of 3 over here. So I started with my pinks the last time. So this time I'm going to start with my yellow, and I'm going to get him about halfway down. So first rose is going to be kind of resting right around here, holding this guy up, giving him a snip, and then pop this guy in there. And then I'm going to do 2 and 3. So next I'll go with my yellow. And give that stem a cut. Pop him in here. And then my last rose kind of over in this area. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to follow up next with my spray roses. So I'm just turning him back to the side that we started with, where there's this big pocket up behind his neck or ear. And next up, I'm going to go for my, actually, you know what? Before I do my spray roses, I'm going to put in my garden roses. So I, as the teacher, get all the broken roses. So you guys probably have much longer stems on yours, but these are pink expression garden roses. So your garden rose is going to be more premium than the traditional rose. You'll see that it has a lot more petals. So the garden roses tend to have more of like a cabbage-like interior, lots and lots and lots of petals kind of all clustered in the center here. Tend to have more of an interesting pattern. So you can see that there is an obvious difference between the 2 varieties. And in terms of price, your garden roses are going to be about 3 times as expensive as your full-size roses. They tend to have a nice smell to them. This particular variety, not getting a ton of smell. So take a whiff and see if maybe there's something wrong with my nose. I don't know. But we'll begin by just removing our leaves. Again, I have super short stems, so just ignore the way that my roses look. We will then take away any guard petals. So that includes any petals that maybe are brown or like look a little bit funky. You can just kind of still pull out petals if they're closer into. They don't have to just be around the outside. So got this guy cleaned up, and then my second one. Go ahead and remove any guard petals there as well. So I want to make sure that this kind of brighter pink color is represented kind of all throughout. So my first rose, I think I'm going to do kind of high up back here. So again, I have a super short rose, so I'm kind of have a little bit less freedom here with how high I want to put it. But I'm going to kind of aim to get it high up in the back here. So I can hold my rose up where I might like it to be. Can cut my stem, And then I'm just going to kind of pop this guy up top there. So this, we've got one rose on this side, and I'm going to turn my bunny all the way around. And my next one, I think I'm going to kind of get over here. So the key is to just kind of, if you do one up top, do one lower the next time, do one on this side, do one on the opposite side the next time. So we're just trying to kind of spread the love a little bit. So this next guy I'm going to situate over here on the other side of my bunny's neck. Can give that guy a nice little cut, and then pop him back here. Beautiful. Again, I'm turning back around to my front where we have this big pocket of roses up behind his ear. All right, next up, I'm going to go for my spray roses. So I think these are lemonites, limoncello spray roses. So beautiful, bright yellow, essentially just a lot of smaller roses all kind of clustered on one stem. So we're going to do the same as before, where we just kind of remove all the little leaves. I tend to get really crazy with this and remove even the little bitty guys up here. And then you'll notice that all of your little buds are also going to have guard petals as well. So you can go ahead and just go through and see if there's anything worth removing. Generally speaking, I just remove something that's going to look distracting. So either it's majorly imperfect or it's just a really different color. So sometimes on your yellow varieties, you'll see that your guard petals are greener. So usually just plucking away anything that I don't love the look of. Okay. And then also remembering to just remove any leaves on the stem itself. Okay, perfect. So my first spray rose, I'm actually going to turn back to this side, and you can see I have a big pocket up here on the other side of my bunny's backside. So I'm going to kind of get my first spray rose over in this area, so I can kind of just position my spray rose where I might like it to be. I can go ahead and give my stem a nice cut, and then I can go ahead and put my stem in. If you have any, once I've cut my stem, you can notice that there's this guy jetting off. That's going to make it kind of hard. I'm only left with about this much stem. So I can actually just break off this little last spray. Now I have this much stem to lodge into my foam, and then this guy I can just put in separately. So I'm going to cut that stem, and then this first spray rose I'm just going to kind of position to give some coverage on my backside there. You're welcome to pop that other little bit in alongside the rest of those, or you can just kind of put it in anywhere you see fit if you ended up taking away a little bud. So I'm just going to pop that over here. And then I'm going to turn back over to this side and then get my second spray rose over here up front. So giving this stem a cut. Again, I'm left with the same kind of situation where I can just pull this guy away, and then my stem will be easier to get in. So I'm going to pop this spray rose in over here. There we go. And then same deal with a spray little bud. If you have an extra one, just pop it in anywhere where you can still kind of see it into your arrangement. All right, so on this side of my design, I happen to have kind of a big hole. So I'm going to take my pink spray rose. We are calling these guys Eva is the name of them, and we should have 3. So you can go ahead and pull all 3 out right now. So I am going to first want to make sure that if you have any big open areas up top, that you can go ahead and plug one of your Eva spray roses in there. So just removing my leaves. Guard petals will be next, and this variety tends to have really obvious guard petals. So do not hesitate to just go go crazy and pull all those guys off. And again, this first spray rose I'm going to use to just kind of plug up this area up top where I have a big opening. So I can hold my spray rose up where I might like it to be in the design. I can cut it down. Again, you may have that where you need to pull off with butter too, so that you have a nice good stem to stick in. And then I'm going to plug in this hole up top. My next goal for my other two is to look for places where I maybe have a big expansive yellow, and then I'm going to go ahead and just plug my spray rose in there. So on this side of my piece, I have kind of a big explosion of yellow. So I'm going to pop some pink in just to any areas where maybe I have tons of yellow. So popping off my guard petals, any leaves, and then for me, I have a big spread of yellow over here. So I'm just going to pop a spray rose in over here to break that up a little bit. And I'll show you, I'll turn my arrangement around so you guys can see where I choose to put mine. So, oops, I just kind of popped some pink in there to break that up. And then on this side, you'll notice I have a big expansive yellow as well. So for my last one, I'm going to use that to break up that pocket of yellow as well. So I happen to have a big pocket of yellow here, so I'm going to pop I'm going to pop this spray in to break that up a bit. There we go. And then if you pulled away any pink buds, you can just pop them in wherever you want. So I have this area in the back that doesn't have much going on. So these last little pink buds, I think I'm just going to nestle into the back. Okay. So next up we have Delphinium. You should have 4 pieces of blue Delphinium. That is this guy. So always nice when you're working in an arrangement, like a mixed arrangement like this, where you have lots of kind of ball-shaped flowers, to then add in some line flowers. So line flowers would be anything that kind of looks like a line. So this will help to kind of texturally give you some variation. Obviously, this is going to be a different color, so that's nice as well. But just the kind of pattern that the flower grows in, having some variation in a mixed design in terms of shape and pattern of growth is also really nice. So what I'm going to do is, I think my first Delphinium, I think I'm going to put up back behind his neck over here on this side. So at this point, if you're not working on the same side as me, it's totally fine. I'm just kind of trying to spread this blue. So I cut my stem down, same way as I was doing before. I am going to remove probably the bottom 4 to 5 buds, just so that it's not like aggressively sticking out of my design. And then my first one, I am going to pop in kind of up top near my bunny's neck. So a little cluster of blue up there. I think I might work my way around. So maybe I went high for this one. So maybe my next one, I'm going to get kind of low over on the back end here. So again, stripping away some of those lower ones so that I have maybe 3 inches of blue. And then for this guy, I'm just going to cut that stem, and then we can pop him in back here. Going through, your last 2 will be just a designer's choice. So anywhere where you feel like your arrangement could use a little difference in color, or maybe it's starting to look really rounded. So for me, I'm going to pop one in over here, like so. And then my last one, let me take a look, see what I've got. I think my last one I might kind of have peeking out on this side of his neck. So again, the goal is to make this look good from all sides. So you also want to look at it from the head and the tail side. Are those sides still interesting looking? If they're not, then it's worth kind of adding in a little extra color or interest on those sides. So bringing you around. This is what we're working with. Okay, and really quickly, or sorry, really easily, just by adding one more color, you're getting so much more depth in this design, and this looks a lot more complex just from adding that one additional color. So next up, I'm going to go for my Hypericum Berry. So you should have 3 of them. Again, texturally, these are very different. So we were working with a lot of things that were matte. Now we have these pretty little shiny berries. So I'm going to remove, I'll remove any leaves unless they cluster this top little berry bunch. So anything below that, I'm going to just go ahead and strip those away. You may not have any leaves on it, which is totally fine. But I will tend to leave on like the top 2 leaves if they do have them. And now we're going to use these berries to just plug in any holes that we're seeing in our design. So I have a big hole over here. Again, if you go high one time, next time it's nice to go low, and then maybe again, kind of moving around the outside of your piece. So I'm going to plug this side over here, and then I'll show you guys what that looks like. So I plugged that little hole by getting a little dainty berry in there. Next, I'm going to do one lower, moving my way around the outside of my rabbit. So for my next one, I think I'm going to pop him in and over here, and then I'll get one on the other side somewhere, anywhere where I have a hole. Okay, amazing. All right, our final element for floral is our ranunculus. So we're using this really pretty blush ranunculus. It does have this interesting kind of foliage on it. So if you have any foliage along the length, just go ahead and remove that. If you have any petals that are banged up, I would go ahead and just pop those guys off. Do that for both stems, any greenery, and then any petals that may be damaged. So ranunculus have really, really thin petals. You can see the petals are almost like tissue paper thin. So really easy if they get contact with anything oily, or if they bend in any way, they bruise really easily. But it has thousands of petals, so you don't have to worry if you have to remove 3 to 5 petals, totally fine. This is going to be kind of a statement piece since we only have 2 of them. So my suggestion would be to either look for places, and for instance, in my piece, I still have this big kind of pocket of yellow happening. So I'm going to put one of my ranunculus kind of in there to break that up. So looking for places where maybe you could use some variation in colors, or somewhere that just is exposed or doesn't have anything going on. So for me, I'm going to pop my first one in on this side. So usually when I'm working with my ranunculus, it's helpful to get my stem in and then kind of thread it in with my fingers. So just pushing down kind of on the base and then slowly threading the stem in. So that's what I'm going to work on doing on this side. If you're still struggling to get your stem in, you can take one of your little spare sticks from a rose or any of your flowers that you cut, whatever, it just needs to be kind of strong stem. You can stick that into the foam, make a nice little hole, and then you can go and put your ranunculus into that little hole. So that's a helpful trick too if you're struggling to get your stem in, just taking a stem of a sturdier stem and then kind of creating a nice little hole that you can then stick your flower stem into. So I did one ranunculus on this side, and then I did one a little bit higher on the opposite side. So we've got this guy here, and then on the other side, I did one kind of high up over here. Okay, so looking great. Next up, if you left any of this greenery behind, you can pop it in anywhere where maybe you feel like you don't have any of that green represented. So for me, it's back here on this side. So I'm just going to pop in any extra bits of pit that I have left behind. So I popped them in right there. And then we're going to take our Spanish moss and go around the base of our arrangement and kind of tuck some of this in. So it looks nice to have it kind of, it doesn't need to be forced into there. It looks nice to have it kind of creeping out a little bit. So the moss kind of even kind of dripping out of the design will look really nice. But it's also going to help just to conceal any open areas. You can also, if you feel like you're seeing too much of your little bag, you can also just kind of push in some of the moss into little holes on the rabbit's body. So that will help to create some just like distraction, if you will. So maybe I'll go over to this side and put a little bit in there as well. You can also, if you started to kind of work some of the moss into the lower parts of your bunny, you can also even maybe get a little bit maybe up here on the front paw so that looks a little bit more natural. So I just nestled some in here. Maybe I want to get just like a little accent down by his ear. So just trying to make it look like it kind of camouflages into the bunny. Okay, amazing. Second to last step, I'm going to take my ribbon very carefully. I'm going to kind of thread it behind my bunny's neck and around. So I just kind of worked it around here, and now I'm going to tie like a cute little bow around my bunny's neck. So I'm doing mine just a little bit off to the side, so it's not like a bow tie underneath my bunny's neck. It's more of like a little accent on his side here. And then you can absolutely get fancy and like either you can cut your tails at like a diagonal, will look really nice. You can kind of cut like triangle shape out and then make it what we call a dovetail. So you can see the bottom is like that. So I think I'm going to go for that style. Just doing like a little dovetail. Let me clean this guy up. Okay. So now he's got a cute little bow. And then final step will be, I'm going to go ahead and play with his ears. So you could turn one of his ears forward like that. I tend to do like one ear forward and then maybe your second ear is kind of bent down. You can also turn it forward and bend it down. You could do them both straight. Whatever speaks to you. And that's it. Made quite a mess over here, so I'm just going to kind of clear it out so you guys can see. So this should look perfectly healthy through the weekend and likely beyond. The couple tips I'm going to give you to make sure that your flowers stay nice and fresh. You are probably going to want to add additional water to your foam. So that foam holds all the water that's going to feed your flowers. And as the flowers start to drink, the foam will dry out a little bit. So my suggestion would be probably Sunday morning to either take a turkey baster or a measuring cup and just kind of slowly pour some water into the back of your bunny's back here. And that will help to re-wet your foam. And then usually I'll do that probably every 2 days, and generally like a half a cup of water is enough to kind of re-wet that brick and keep all of your flowers drinking and healthy. Other than that, I would just choose a place to display this that is away from heat or direct sunlight. So just wouldn't want to put it next to a heat vent that has drafting hot air. Probably not on the countertop, like right above your dishwasher. But other than that, totally fine. If it's a little bit warmer in your house, just make sure that you're adding water, maybe a little bit more water. So maybe 3/4 of a cup of water rather than a half a cup. and then wanting to keep it away from direct sunlight. So it can definitely be in a room that's getting sunlight. You just wouldn't want to put it in your windowsill where it's like sitting and baking in the sun. Other than that, I hope that you guys have a special place to display this. We have so many fun workshops coming up. There's a spring wreath class, there's peonies classes, there's tons of different color palette focused classes. I mean, so much up there. I think we have all the majority of our classes up through the end of the summer, and then there are also kids classes up there as well. Yesterday we made an Easter basket arrangement. So if you have kids that you think would enjoy doing a class like this, they tend to be like, I try to keep those classes to about 20 minutes, and they tend to be more focused on the colors of the flowers rather than the names and specifics of different flowers. So those are really fun and great for kids. Check out our website. All of the information is on there. If you happen to take pictures of your bunny or your tablescape on Easter, please do tag us on Instagram because we love seeing what you guys create. Other than that, we will see you in class again soon.